My last Broadway adventure, I was hired to play Daddy Warbucks and Annie. I'm telling this story for Mike. And thank you for bringing me here. And Robert and Heidi. And it's just such an honor to be with you guys. So I was hired to play Daddy Warbucks and Annie. And that's the tall, bald guy. And before we opened on Broadway, we had to play 6 cities outside of New York. That's to get your timing down and make sure the show goes smooth. It's kind of like a working rehearsal. And we were in Albany, New York at the State Theater, which holds about 4,000 people. And this particular performance was $1,000 a ticket for an AIDS benefit. And that night, the governor of New York would be there, the mayor of New York City, lots of celebrities, and the New York press corps, the New York Times, the Daily News, the Post, Cindy Adams, Liz Smith, Frank Rich from the Times, New York Magazine. They were all going to be in the audience. And we had 65 adult actors, 30-piece orchestra, conductor, the tech staff, the administrative staff, 20 little orphan girls, their mothers, their teachers, their chaperones, Annie the dog, Sandy the dog's understudy, the dog trainers, 18 massive trucks full of equipment. It was a big deal. My days consisted of the following: wake up in the morning, knock back a scotch, smoke a joint, pop a Valium, go to the bathroom, knock back another scotch, pop another Valium, smoke another joint, get in bed. Smoke a little crack, stay in bed. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, dresser shows up, slaps me, gets me into the bathroom, gets me in the shower, off I go to the theater. I manage to do my show. I lay off drugs and alcohol till intermission. I do a little bit of Coke and 1 Jack Daniels neat. Then at night, I'm out in the nightclubs with Coke, hookers, and booze. Coke, hookers, and booze, Coke, hookers, and booze. Then before going to bed, I would eat copious amounts of eggs, pancakes, and orange juice to soak up the booze. Then I would inject heroin. And this was your grandfather's heroin, not this stuff that's going around today. It was real heroin. Inject heroin into my jugular to put myself to sleep. And when you do that kind of heroin, it opiates your digestive tract, as many of you know. And whatever food you've eaten gets trapped down there and it builds up pressure. And at some point, you open your mouth to yawn or say hello and you ninja vomit. Like I could knock your glasses off from here with a stream of puke. And so now it's the show. Audience is full, celebrities, men in tuxes, women in formals, the orchestra's playing. I've just told Annie that I'm going to adopt her. I'm itching, I'm seeing spots, and I'm sweating a lot. I don't feel good at all. I'm supposed to waltz with Annie. The Warbucks set disappears. The stage is flooded with dry ice. A twinkle drop appears with the night sky and the moon. It's beautiful, costs about $250,000. Every night when that thing went on, the audience would go, oh. So the orchestra starts playing. It's French horns and violins and the cellos. And I tell Annie I'm going to adopt her. And I put her little 9-year-old feet on my big feet. And I start showing her how to waltz. And we start waltzing around the stage as I'm singing a ballad called Something Was Missing. My brain. I'm choreographed at the end of the song to pick up the little girl, hold her in front of me, and hit the last note of the song. No one but... And I vomited right in Annie's face, point blank range. She screamed, the audience screamed. It made the papers. I kept puking. I dropped her on the floor. I started laughing like it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen because I was very inappropriate and selfish. They brought the curtain down and announced there would now be a 45-minute intermission. The producer came out, punched me in the face. I punched him. He punched me. I picked up a chair, started beating him with it. Then the police arrived, and I spent a few months in jail. That was the end of my Broadway career, needless to say. So I went back to my apartment in Times Square, and I tried to sell drugs to make a living, which I didn't do well at all. I was so paranoid, it was in Times Square, I was so paranoid that I would army crawl around the apartment because I didn't want the ninja police to see me through the window. And I spent a lot of time hiding under my bed. I didn't wear clothes. I would go out at night and mug people. I got arrested a couple of times. Breaking and entering, armed robbery, breaking and entering occupied dwelling. I used to mug people, beat them in the head, take their stuff and pawn it. Pawning just about everything that I owned. It got really ugly. One night I decided, and I looked like I had been in a concentration camp. I looked like a combination between Mel Gibson, Gary Busey, Nick Nolte, and Charles Manson, all on a very bad day. I made a decision to murder a drug dealer. I carried a gun all the time. And I met him in a park in Forest Hills, Queens in the middle of the night. I whipped the gun out, stuck in his face, pulled the trigger, and the gun jammed. Then his friends began to beat me. I had a broken sternum, 4 broken ribs, 2 stab wounds right up here. They grabbed my hair, cut it. They took a knife and cut me across this nostril and this eyelid. They stuffed my mouth with crack pipes, beat me in the face with a baseball bat. That's when I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was profusely bleeding, and they had defecated on me from head to toe. And if that hasn't happened to you, that's a yet. That's still waiting for all of us. You don't have to do it. I did it for you. I crawled out to the street. By the grace of God, a cab driver stopped for me. That man was in Narcotics Anonymous and tried to 12-step me. He helped me pick glass out of my mouth for about an hour, had some rags he tore off and helped stop some of the bleeding, wrapped me up in a blanket. I convinced him to take me back to my apartment. I had no keys. I had to break in through the bathroom window, and I crawled to the kitchen. I was starving. I opened the refrigerator. There was nothing in there but a carton of milk. I impulsively grabbed it, downed it. It had been spoiled for a very long time. I began to vomit. The sink filled up with amber liquid, which was Jack Daniels, with little white lumps of curdled milk. And in my psychotic state, I thought those little white lumps of milk was crack cocaine. So naturally, I stuck my face in the sink and lapped up my puke, spit out those little lumps, dried them off, stuffed them in a broken crack pipe, and tried to smoke my puke. And when that didn't work, I was done with this life. I had a mason jar with about 200 Vicodin in it in the hall closet and 1 more bottle of Jack Daniels. I guzzled that Jack. I took all the Vicodin. Well, you could see it if my sleeves were unbuttoned. I took a big knife and I cut my wrists, under my arms, and my elbows so I would bleed out as fast as possible. And I laid down on the floor in a pool of blood, hoping to die, to leave this dense plane. And suddenly I had a moment of clarity. It was like a voice inside my head said, "You don't want death, you want more life and don't know how to get it. I'm going to show you." And suddenly my mind was flooded with thoughts about an actor I had worked with named Richard Springle. He played Colonel Pickering to my Henry Higgins in the world tour of My Fair Lady, the Broadway show. He was always very kind to me. I'd never been to his house, hadn't spoken to him on the phone in 3 or 4 years. And suddenly I remembered his phone number. I crawled to my landline. I called. He answered. I said, "Colonel, I'm dying. Help." And then I passed out. He called information, 411, asked for Bruce Kimball in Akron, Ohio. He knew my father, got my address. Turns out he lived directly across Times Square from me. Is it odd or is it God? He made a beeline across Times Square. The doorman didn't want to let him in. He screamed at him to call an ambulance, punched the doorman, went into the building, broke my front door apart, found me covered with feces and blood, blue, not breathing, carried me into the elevator, out of the building, and into a waiting ambulance. I regained consciousness about 2 weeks later, strapped onto a gurney in a psych ward in a facility in New Jersey. And I knew that I had hit my bottom because I was in New Jersey. I love to laugh. I'm so done with suffering. That began the first of 19 trips to treatment. I got high every time I walked out the door. That was over a period of 4 years. And in treatment, here comes solution. I met 2 men, Mel and Edgar. Edgar's father was one of the first 87 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was a calligrapher. He created those red and black signs that say, think, 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 live, let live. That was Edgar's father's calligraphy that we're still using today. Edgar did his steps with Bill W. and a man named Hank Parkhurst who helped get the big book published. He was Bill's first sponsee in New York, and he wrote 2 of the chapters in the big book, To Wives and to the Employer. And Edgar did his steps with Bill and Hank. The other gentleman's name was Mel Barger, Mel B. He wrote 5 of the books that are listed in the front of the big book. Pass It On, AA Comes of Age, Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. He edited As Bill Sees It. He was AA's official historian and archivist, and the editor of the International AA Grapevine magazine. He was also Bill W.'s traveling companion and gave the eulogy at Lois Wilson's funeral. And Mel and Edgar were great pals. And Mel was in New York at the time writing a book on Ebby Thatcher. In any event, I got to know these men over a period of 4 years. And my last time in treatment, they showed up and they had me discharged. They rode the train back to New York. They took my keys, strip searched me, had me pack a bag, convinced me to sign paperwork making Father Edgar, he was a retired Episcopal priest, and he became my guardian. And I was 35 years old, been on Broadway, traveled around the world, and they treated me like a 5-year-old on a mommy leash. They said, whatever's happening in New York when the sun goes down is none of your damn business. You're not allowed outside alone without adult supervision, is what they told me. We did the steps quickly and often, as they were designed to be done in the explicit, specific, clear-cut directions that are found in the first 164 pages of a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, today that book is on the Library of Congress's list of the top 50 books that most transformed American society in the 20th century, making it one of the most important documents ever written in American history. That's according to the Library of Congress. The big book is now translated into 72 languages and is available in 194 countries. Amazing. And has transformed the lives of tens of millions of people. So I did what Edgar and Mel told me to do. I went to 6 to 8 meetings a day. I got my first sponsee when I had 30 days. That's how it was done in the old days when we had a 50 to 75% permanent sobriety rate as opposed to 3 to 5% today. It was done quickly and often. The 4th step was a simple checklist. A drunken monkey could do it in 20 minutes. It didn't take weeks and weeks and weeks. You didn't write a novel. It wasn't like that. My favorite quote from Dr. Bob, he said, the 12 steps are not spiritual philosophies to be studied, understood, and then taken. They are survival actions to be carried out immediately to provide instant hope and relief and save our lives. They are a tourniquet to stop the bleeding now. It is battlefield triage.